Hello, Pod Smashers of the Internet, and welcome to another episode of
80-Bit Pod Smash,
where gaming goes to grab a beer. We are your hosts.
Penguin and Termite. I am Penguin.
I am Termite, and we are a weekly video game podcast smashing together ideas that you care about with video games.
That's right, and tonight we are doing another one of our series called Developer Profiles, where we pick a, video game developer, and we kind of go through some of their history and some of the games they've made, and just kind of celebrate the developers, or deride them if they're worth derision. I don't think we've done one where we've, trashed anybody, but whatever, it's fine. Tonight we're going to be doing, in honor of the release of Outriders, no matter what you think of that game, if you like it or don't like it, it's coming out and it's definitely making an impact on the gaming community. And so celebrating that, we're going to be doing the developer of that game, People Can Fly. And I'm glad we are, because they have a really interesting history, and I'd like to see where they go after Outriders. So we'll talk about
very interesting history involving Fox News, no doubt. So stick with us, because we're gonna jump into that.
Yep. Cool. All right. So we will get all to that in our main topic, but we're gaming goes to grab a beer, so we like to talk about what we are drinking tonight. So let's start there. What are you drinking, Termite?
In the trips that I had made to Aslan in the past, where I bought much different beers. Who uses English anymore? Many different beers. This is one of those, so I'm going to introduce you guys to a new beer. It was new to me when I went shopping there, but I've already had the other 3 in the 4-packs. This is the last one. This beer is called Ahoyo. And I jokingly met you on our Zencaster platform and went, Ahoyo! And you said, hello. I was greeting you, and it was pretty funny. So it's I hope that's how you pronounce it. It's Ahoyo. So it's an India Pale Ale, so an IPA brewed with sour gummy worms. Now, if I was in any other bottle shop or any other brewery that I'd never heard of or didn't really know, and I saw that, I would skip right on over it. I'd be like, nope, I'm good. But because this is Aslan, and Aslan doesn't make junk, everything they make is amazing. At least everything I've had, which is a lot. I was like, I'm interested. And I was in person at the bar in their little retail area, and they had a glass to kind of, marketing. There was a glass with some sour gummy worms in it. And apparently if you were to buy one on site, on tap, they would fill the beer bottle or the beer glass with that, and would have sour gummy worms in it. So they were taking themselves pretty seriously with this. And I was like, okay, so what does it taste like? It tastes like a sour with some hops in it. It's that much of the sour gummy worms flavor that it actually tastes like a fruited sour with hops on the back end. Even though that's not what the can says the can says it's an IPA brewed with sour gummy worms. No. If I was a blind taste tester and I was drinking this beer, I'd be like, this is a fruited sour with hops added, like a dry hopped fruit sour.
I like gummy worms.
Yes, this is sour gummy worms. This is very, very good.
Nice.
I highly recommend it. It is a hazy IPA. You cannot see through it. And it has that kind of body and feel to it that a hazy IPA would have. So I'm sure this has to be based on one of their other IPAs, I bet. And they just conditioned it with sour gummy worms or something. I don't know, but it's really good. It's very refreshing. It's one of those high quality sours that you would get from one of our local breweries here. And it's enjoyable, refreshing, and an easy drinker. It's 6%, so it won't let you up too much. I highly recommend it.
Cool. All right, I am drinking a beer from the collection I got, the 4 individual beers that I purchased from Total Wine my trip a couple weeks ago. And it is from the far, far regions of Danville, Virginia.
And so I have family there.
It's a brewery called Ballad Brewing, and I think we should go there sometime, because those who may not be familiar, we go by Penguin and Termite, but both of our names are Daniel, and I feel like Dan and Danny need to go to Danville to Ballad Brewing and get beers together at some point. Anyways, this beer is called Just Pressed, and it's got a picture of laundry on it, so I think that's what they're referring to there, and freshly pressed laundry. And it is a lime ginger sour, which is what intrigued me to it, what drew me to it in the first place, because I like ginger with alcohol. One of my favorite beers is Good Juju, which is from Left Hand. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's got ginger in it. But so I like sours and I like lime as well, so I thought this was a shoo-in for me. And it actually is really good. I'm really glad I got this beer. It is, it kind of has the look of it's a really bright, really transparent, I can see through it. I can see all the bubbles fizzing up from it, so it really very much reminds me of drinking I don't know, even a light beer, like a Bud Light or something like that, but its taste is fantastic. Ooh. I definitely get both the ginger and the lime And I think ginger is a good flavor to kind of balance the sour of the lime.
Is there anything on the bottle to read?
No, unfortunately, there's not.
So their website here has one sentence about what it is. It's a blended wheat beer and sour ale.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize they're mixing two different beers.
Mm-hmm.
Like
imagine
beer and sour ale together.
Yeah. Oh, Interesting. Yeah, it's really good, and I can see that too because it looks like a wheat beer. I would even go as far as say it almost tastes like a Bud Light lime if you threw a little sprig of ginger in there. Like it's really, really, really good.
And it's only 5%. So
yeah, it's not super. It's not gonna knock you off your feet or anything like that. So I figured it was a bright, sunny spring day, and this was a perfect choice for that. So
this brewery is 15 minutes away from my grandma's house down there. So it's actually my wife's grandma, but we just call her grandma. So she's my grandma too. Mm-hmm. So next time we go visit post COVID, when we're all got our Fauci ouchies installed, we can head down there, and I know I can pick stuff up for you because it's a 15-minute drive.
Just give me a 6-pack of this. This stuff is awesome.
Yeah, in fact, I think this place opened right before the pandemic, or at least the last time I was down there before the pandemic, and I wanted to get out there and do that, but we were visiting with family so much that I couldn't escape.
Sure.
And it'd be okay.
Yeah.
It's like, nah, you're kind of busy here. Okay. We got kids. We're traveling with kids. It's a thing. But yeah, the brewery looks awesome. It's a fun little rustic, like built into a factory looking kind of place. So lots of wood and brick. It's cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Well, that's what we're drinking then. So let's move on and fill this time up with what's going on in our lives or whatever.
I do believe you have a full story.
I do.
About a TV.
I have
a PlayStation.
I had a bad week,
and some
guys.
Crazy stuff happening in your life.
I've not
so
had.
Lay that on us.
Sure, I will. That's fine. I was debating whether to save your favorite things or not, but it's probably long enough.
There's nothing in this thing that should be a favorite thing. There's nothing in this story that's favorite.
Well, I'll get to it when I get to favorite things, but nevertheless, I've had deaths in my family that I've had to contend with. I've had heartbreaks that I've dealt with. I've had very, very largely disappointing life events happen to me, to be just casually vague book here with that. So I can't say this was the worst week I've had. But in regards to like kind of that first world problem level of like irritations and frustrations and disappointments, those things where it's like none of this stuff is like, devastating emotionally, but when you put it all together, it's just a really, really frustrating set of circumstances. I had that week. I had one of those weeks, and it was probably what I described it as probably my worst first world problems week I've ever had. And it started with like there was some work stuff that was really frustrating. I won't get into too much of it, but let's just say that like I've been partially responsible for like setting up laptops for new employees since the pandemic started. It's questionable whether I should, be solely responsible for that in the first place, but I'm working through all that with work. But I sent a laptop to an employee, so that employee had my address, and then he sent it back to me. And when he was let go. So he sent it back, though, with a very passive-aggressive move. He made it cash on delivery. So Monday morning at 9 a.m., I get a knock on my door from FedEx, and they're like, hey, we have this laptop or this package for you. It was a laptop, and it was like, it's from this guy. And I like barely recognized the name because he's been let go of for a while. And I was like, okay. And they're like, we need you to give us a money order or a cashier's check for cash on delivery. And I'm like, what? Like I barely even know what those things are, much less like how to get one using my work. Like I have a credit card with work. That's it. That's all I have. I was like, I can't pay with it for credit card. Nope. Can't do credit card. It has to be a money order or a cashier's check made out to this guy. Like not even made out to FedEx, just made out to this guy or with UPS or whatever it was. So I had to, long story short, I spent an unreasonable amount of my week trying to get a money order, ended up having to use my own personal bank account to get one at like Wells Fargo or something and then get reimbursed through work. So that was like, just to give you a taste of like the kind of crap that was thrown my way at work.
And this employee or ex-employee was just sending his equipment back?
He was just sending equipment back, but he didn't reach out to us. If he had reached out to us, we would have like paid for a shipping label and had, what I mean?
Okay.
Like
so that's what he was doing. He was trying to get his shipping costs
covered. He was trying to get
his
stuff back. Yeah, exactly. He was trying to get shipping costs covered. We would have handled that if he had just talked to us. Right. Yeah. Talk to someone. No. He had to do this. I'm going to send it back to the only address I have and label it cash on delivery. I was like, Urgh. And like UPS was not helpful at all. I like UPS, awful customer service. I wasn't even able to talk to a human being on the phone because I didn't sign up for I didn't make an account with them or something stupid. So I'm dealing with all that at work and all that nonsense. And then also just other frustrating things at work I don't need to get into. On top of that, I'm trying to get medication for ADHD, right? Because I was recently diagnosed and I've got a pretty severe case of it. So I go to my primary care physician after going through all this rigmarole, all this stuff that I had to do, getting the diagnosis. And that's been like a whole year's worth of my life. And my primary care physician is just giving me the runaround. Like he basically, I met with him once after getting my diagnosis and he's like, okay, well, I need you to do these labs. So I did the labs and I came back and he's like, okay, well, I still don't want to diagnose you because you might have some anxiety issues. And I think that this will make it worse. And I'm like, I was like, it says there in my report that she thinks my anxiety, the psychologist, not you primary care physician who does no degree in psychology. The psychologist says she expects that my anxiety issues are a result of my undiagnosed ADHD, my untreated ADHD. Right. And he's like, yeah, well, but just in case it's not, like, I don't want to make your anxiety worse, so I want you to see a psychiatrist instead. And I'm like, this is making my anxiety worse. What you're doing right now is making my anxiety worse. And he's like, so he's giving me the runaround. And, you know, again, this is like, I saw him twice since the end of my diagnosis. So that's what, two copays and another additional copay for the lab results. So I'm like $90 deep, like, with this guy. And I'm like, are you kidding me? All of that just to say that you're not going to give me medication for my very serious, mental condition. Yeah. So I was very frustrated with my primary care physician. So I called. So I was like, he gave me a referral to a psychiatrist, but I'm like, no, thanks. I'm going to go to the people that did my diagnosis. So I call them and they're like, and they're like, we have a psychiatrist on staff who is a nurse practitioner and therefore able to give you medication. So I'm like, sweet, awesome. Not only that, they're like, we have an appointment for you next Thursday. I'm like, oh, this is sweet, awesome, perfect. I was like, this sounds so good. Write me down, jot me down. I'll be there. And then they're like, oh, but looks like there's some outstanding charges in your account. I was like, awesome, sweet, let's take care of them. Let's knock them out. $1,100. I was like, whoa, I have insurance. What is this? So she sends me, so the person I talked to, she's very nice, very kind. It's not her fault that I owe $1,100. She sent me a bill and with an itemized list of charges. And I cross-referenced that with my insurance claims because I can clearly see on the bill she sent me that insurance was engaged. Insurance was definitely paying for parts of this. So I'm like, what's going on here? Why is this so high? I look at my insurance, I cross-reference the claims, I come to the conclusion that, I've met my deductible, so co-insurance should kick in. Mm-hmm. But I'm thinking to myself, I'm racking my brain, and I'm like, my deductible says it's $1,000, and that I reached that deductible when I hit that $1,000 mark, hence the $1,100 charge, and then co-insurance kicked in after that. And then I was like, but I'm pretty sure I opted in for a lower deductible plan at the beginning of January. And so I called HR. I verified that I was on like a specific plan. That specific plan, I double checked my pay stub. I'm paying for the sexy plan with a $500 deductible. I should only have a $500 deductible. That's not saying my bill should be only $500. It'll be a little bit more than that because there's still co-insurance to account for. But a $750 bill is much better than an $1,100 bill. So now I'm in the middle of all of this. I had to cancel my appointment and be like, hey, look, I'm gonna make sure you guys get your due, but I need to sort this out with insurance before. So I'm now in the midst of a claim dispute with insurance, trying to figure out what went wrong and why I'm paying for one plan but only getting the benefits of a whole different plan that I had last year. So it's a mess. All that. I'm dealing with all of that this frustrating week. Again, none of it's like devastating, but all of it's very frustrating. And then I'm about to go to a friend's house on Friday night for a quarterly bro down, as he says, where he gets all of his brothers together, and I'm an honorary member of their family, so I get together with them at least for a period of time for like one night. And so I'm doing that Friday. I'm leaving the house. I say goodbye to my family. I close my door and I hear ka-chaka-ba-ba-cha-ba-cha-kom. I'm like, what was that? My wife goes, Daniel, come back in right now. And I'm like, what? So I go back in. My TV, my brand new Vizio Quantum MQ7 TV 4K is falling off. It's falling off the wall. No. I lift it up and it doesn't look like immediately the screen is cracked, but as soon as I put power into it and turn it on, it's very clear that the panel is utterly destroyed, completely unusable. I feel my hand along the screen. It's definitely cracked all throughout it. The TV had my PlayStation. It was hanging over the mantle of my fireplace, and it had my PlayStation was. In order to reach the HDMI cord, I had to put my PlayStation on that mantle as well. So it had knocked over my PlayStation 5 as well. For those of you whose hearts just started, whose blood pressure just went up, I tested my PS5. It was fine. So we'll get back to that point. But my PS5 was fine. It's okay. I've tested like installing discs and stuff. Like I've shaken it. The fans are still running. There's no loose pieces inside. The only thing was I had my controller plugged into the front USB port. And when the chaos happened, the controller was ripped from it, and in such a way, at such an angle where it did completely make that USB port unusable. That's it, though. That's the only damage sustained to my PlayStation 5. So, also, it didn't land on the head of my son, who was in the room at the time. So, there's also that little blessing there. So, all this is just to say that, my $400 TV or whatever is now completely busted. The problem, for those of you wondering what went wrong, I was successfully drilled into studs, which was what I first thought was the problem. Like somehow maybe I didn't have a stud finder, so I did have to manually find the studs. And so I thought maybe I just screwed that up. No, I found the studs. The problem was the screws that I used. This was a TV mount that I inherited from work. And the screws that came with it were designed to be used with an entirely different mounting system. And to say the least, they were too small. They couldn't reach the stud. So I wasn't even drilled into the stud. The whole thing was hanging off a drywall alone. And that's why it fell. That's why it was only a matter of time. I had 2 different TVs mounted on it at different periods of time. I've had that thing for like 7 or 8 months, and it hadn't fallen up to that point. But it was only a matter of time. So, yeah.
It sounds like you closing the door on the way out was the straw that broke the camel's back.
It literally broke my TV. It was the straw that broke my TV. So, it's okay. My wife and I have decided to save. We've got a strategy with which to save up for a replacement. She understands like that it was like my special treat from last year, and it's really, really crappy. So she's a kind and loving woman and has decided to, help make it a reality to replace it. But it's still a bummer, you know what I mean? It's completely sunk cost. It almost took out, my PlayStation, and then it could have also been really bad. It could have killed my kid.
Yeah.
Or hurt myself or my wife or one of my dogs, and that would have been really crappy. So yeah, we have definitely I've learned my lesson. I've learned where I went wrong. Don't automatically assume when you inherit something secondhand that you're going to have all the pieces you need to install it correctly. So I have actually bought a brand new $20 online universal TV mount. It came with some very, 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 very secure hardware. I definitely made sure I literally hung off of it. it only holds 130 pounds, and I'm like 100, not 30, but much higher than that. But still, just for a second, I lifted my feet. I held onto it, lifted my feet off the ground for just a second, and held my weight. So I'm like, I'm pretty confident this thing will hold a 30-pound TV, 40-pound TV when I get a replacement for it. So, but still, that's my story. That's how crappy my week was. Sorry for talking forever, but that was my week.
And so my end of this is I have the general context of your week as you have been communicating with me each and every day that different stuff was happening. So the buildup was there, and I was sitting at a local brewery here in Fredericksburg for dinner with my family, as it was one of the first warm enough spring days where we could go out to eat and be outside completely, and it not be you don't need a jacket. And so we were sitting there, and in comes the text. My 4K TV fell off the wall, and it knocked my PlayStation 5. I don't even know what my wife was telling me at the moment. I just collapsed. I was like, no, oh my gosh. And I think I did respond I don't think there's a friend in the world who would be able to sympathize with you as much as I can. And of course, my wife saw my reaction and asked what happened. She is probably a little bit more concerned, is someone hurt or someone in the hospital or something serious. I'm like, oh no, Dan's TV fell off the wall, knocked his PlayStation 5 off the mantle, and it fell, and the TV is shot, and we don't know if the PlayStation 5 works yet. And she goes, oh my gosh. And I was like, I know. And she said, if this happened to you, you'd be done. I was like, yep, I'd be broke. I would just leave.
I said, but if my plate, I had to, I delayed getting to my friend's house by an hour because I had to make sure, that I got the TV out of that room. You know what I mean? I had to make sure that there was immediate debris that needed to be removed. But I also had to test my PS5. I said to myself, I will not be able to sleep tonight if this is in limbo, if I don't know the state of this. So, but I told you too, I was like, if my PlayStation 5 had died, if I had lost that, I would be catatonic. I would have been literally not, I would have been unable to emotionally function the rest of the weekend.
Yep. Oh man. And I would have just credit card, replacement TV. That's the only way I would be happy to be even close to normal. Would be to know that I've got a brand new TV on the way. But with PlayStation 5s, you can't even do that. You cannot just go buy a new one. They're so hard to find. That's why this whole situation is just at that much level of magnitude. more scary, is you cannot just go get another PlayStation 5. You have to sit and fight the bots and fight the super strict supply chain and try to finagle your way into one.
I would have sent it in. If it had broken, I would have sent it in for repairs and eaten that cost, whatever it is, because it's easier to do that than it is to buy. Easier to do that and do without it for a month than to try to buy a new one for sure.
Now I'm all stressed out.
That's my story. Let's segue into our next segment to talk about more fun things, which is
doing this podcast is our favorite thing.
Doing this podcast is our favorite thing.
Favorite things.
Favorite Things is a segment of our show where we update you with the thing that we are most excited from the week that we discovered or rediscovered or experienced, in hopes that you feel inspired to go out and find and tell us about your next favorite thing. I truly had such a crappy week that I really debated if I wanted to even do this segment this week. And I discussed with you about it. I was like, could I skip it again? Could I just say I had a crappy week and have nothing to say? I will talk about what my favorite thing is, but I also thought about, could we do a reverse favorite thing and just say, could we talk about the crappiest things? I got plenty of those. I got plenty of those for this week.
Oh, it's so sad.
But since I talked a lot, let's go ahead. I'll go ahead and let you brighten the room up and talk about what your favorite thing is.
Sweet. As I mentioned before, the weather is starting to turn here on the East Coast, and it's getting warm enough to be outside, as well as it's my wife's birthday weekend. And so we decided we wanted to go check out a winery, which we had dipped into on the way home from Charlottesville back in November when it was really cold and it was not fun to be outside. This time it was. So where we went to was a vineyard called Barboursville Vineyard, I guess, winery. What's the difference? Winery, vineyard? I don't know.
I don't know.
It's in Barboursville, Virginia. And it's this amazing, immaculate place in the mountains. It's this awesome, like, sprawling kind of complex. They have an inn you can stay at that has multiple buildings and houses. You can stay overnight. There's a whole like historical preserve of a governor's mansion that caught on fire in the 1800s that was designed by Thomas Jefferson himself. And they're known for a wine called the Octagon, and it's named after like an octagonally shaped room where you can sit and eat and drink. So there's a nice fine dining restaurant. There's two of them, and one's more of like a more casual lunch type place, and one is a fine dining evening only cloth tablecloths type of restaurant. So my wife and I went. We got a babysitter for the kids and just drove down there and had an amazing day, just doing wine flights and samples and tastings, charcuteries, small meals, and then we got some wine and went out to a picnic table that you could overlook like the mountain, and then we walked around to the ruins and had this amazing time. It was absolutely phenomenal, and I highly recommend if you're anywhere between Charlottesville and Fredericksburg and that whole span of stuff. There's a whole bunch of vineyards. Barboursville is the place to go. It is the best Virginia wine that I've ever had. And I've had some experience with Virginia wines, which I didn't realize how much experience I had with Virginia wines. So we were talking about it. And we're like, oh yeah, we've been to like Heartwood and Lake Anna and Williamsburg Winery, Potomac Point up in Stafford. And the list goes on. There's many, many more. Keswick. And so Barboursville has amazing quality wine. We brought some home. We had a wonderful birthday experience. So that is my favorite thing.
Nice. To answer your question, the difference between a vineyard and a winery, I had to look it up because I was curious. A vineyard is where grapes are grown, and a winery is where wine is produced. So if the grapes are grown and the wine is produced in the same premise, I would assume it is a vineyard and winery.
Interesting.
So, yeah. But I would imagine there are places where the grapes are grown somewhere else and then brought to a winery to be produced. Yes. So,
I see. So where we went was called the Barboursville Vineyards, and they actually have a winery on site.
So, yeah, cool. Makes sense. Yeah. Awesome. All right, so my favorite thing, again, it's connected to my awful week. I will just say that my favorite thing in this case is going to be my PlayStation 5's, I gotta say, the outer shell. Like, when I first saw that thing, I was like, this is ridiculous, this is insane, and those things are going to be so fragile. And I am now, can say I have officially tested it, inadvertently, unplanned testing of this thing, and goodness gracious, the thing is a beast. And those outer wings or whatever, I credit for pretty much absorbing the entire blow of the fall. And I can say that with certainty that my PlayStation 4 probably would not have survived that fall. My Switch would probably not have survived that fall. Mm-hmm. My laptop would probably not have survived that fall. I mean, it's not the tallest. It's not the tallest mantle in the world, but like when sitting on it, it's at like head level. to me. So it's probably about 5 feet off the
And
ground.
you have a stone floor right there because fireplace, right?
It's like it's not stone, but it does. I think it cleared the base of the fireplace or whatever. So it did. I think it did hit. It was on carpet when I saw it.
Okay.
So I believe it hit carpet and didn't fall in the heart. So I can also credit that. I also don't think the TV fell from it. I think the TV like knocked it away and then fell in a different direction. So I don't think it's sandwiched between the floor and the TV. So there's a lot that again, I didn't see the fall, but I'm just basing it off of what I saw afterwards, the aftermath. And so I do think it was spared some extra forces, hitting it. But nevertheless, it's a hoss and a beast of a console. So I'm going to say that I'm kind of counting my blessings there and saying that like, it could have been worse. It could have been more frustrating. So my favorite thing is my beast of a PlayStation 5 surviving that fall. So good job, Sony. We'll see. I am going to be super paranoid now that there's going to be some issue with processing graphics or something that I'm just not able to really see until I see it over a longer period of time. But I did some initial tests and things seem to be running okay and fine. And if there are any slight minor graphical malfunctions, it's only because I'm hyper aware of them now that they were probably there before and I just wasn't paying attention to them, or that like it's minor enough that it doesn't, we were still playing Outriders last night at 60 frames per second. So it was fine. So anyways, that's that. That's my favorite thing. My PlayStation.
All right.
5. Cool. All right. So that was cathartic for me. That was a moment of catharsis. Going to talk about it. I feel better just talking about it and ranting about it. So if you feel like I was getting emotional, it sounded like I was getting emotional, it's because I was a little emotional, but it's nice to kind of purge that. So I'm going to use that as a way to segue into our next segment, which is DLC. Stands for downloadable content. It is a segment of our show where we just have a fun discussion you would normally have about video games that may or may not be related to our main topic. Tonight's is not. It is, in fact, related to this story and this idea, but I just talked about having a catharsis. And so I wanted to talk about what a catharsis is for those who may not know. A catharsis comes from Greek tragedy, theater in Greek tragedy, where the whole purpose of tragic story was to elicit a catharsis. And what a catharsis means, it's a Greek word. I don't know the exact meaning of it off the top of my head.
Cleansing or purging.
Oh, perfect. That's what it is. It was meant to cleanse you of negative emotions. So when you saw one of the most famous Greek tragedies, Oedipus Rex, you were meant to feel these feelings so that way you don't feel them in real life and act on them. So to cleanse you of these negative emotions. So I wanted to use that idea to talk. Again, the idea of catharsis is that you're just like, you feel better after experiencing something sad or frustrating. And so I wanted to, as our DLC discussion for today, quickly ask, what video games have you played that have given you something close to resembling a catharsis, or maybe have just directly given you a catharsis? Have you ever experienced catharsis from a video game, and what were those games?
This moment right here, where you talked about catharsis in video games, there was actually a video game entitled Catharsis made by a development studio called Metropolis Software House, which happens to be one of the founding members of People Can Fly, originally starting. Nice. So how did you do that? I don't know, but it was a 1990s game called Catharsis, and it's an exact fit into what we're talking about.
This is exactly what we're calling a coincidence. This is the definition of coincidence. No, I mean, we're talking about catharsis. But.
Yeah, I know. But you asked me the question, if it was a video game that made me feel cathartic. I don't know, because I don't really think I have a genuine experience of catharsis in my life at all. I don't know.
Oh, interesting. You don't know if you've ever experienced catharsis before. I mean, this can literally just be a game that has elicited an emotional reaction from you that made you feel better or made you feel like you experienced something profound. It doesn't have to necessarily be like, I purged myself of negative emotions, because that's not genuinely what catharsis is. The truth is just, human beings are designed to feel. Our modern understanding of catharsis is just the idea that guess what? You're designed to feel emotions, and most of modern life trains you to bottle them up. So when you actually experience a genuine emotion from an artistic work, you're going to feel better from it, because you're supposed to actually experience and express emotions.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, with that definition in mind, then the most recent experience I've had is definitely The Last of Us Part 2. Okay. I was pondering that for days afterward. I was consuming every conversation I could find on the internet about it and wanting to respond and talk and interact over it. I even talked to people who weren't even into video games about this game is like an art form that should be talked about in academia. I know you're not a gamer, but it's a big deal, and I just experienced it, and it's awesome. But I guarantee you there's a lot of potential in replaying Death Stranding. We've talked about this before, I think, in what will be next week's episode that we've already recorded. Right. But I talked about Death Stranding and how if we went back to that now, given that it's a game dealing with the pains of isolation and lack of connection. And the entire premise of the game is Sam traveling the world across the country, not the world, the United States, to establish connection and reestablish Bridges. And his last name is Bridges. It's very cheeky. I think there's a lot of potential there. So yeah, the most recent experience was Last of Us Part 2, but I think if I were to revisit Death Stranding, given the current thing we just all have been living with for the last year, the pandemic, Death Stranding would probably take the cake.
Yeah, you stole my answer, because Death Stranding is probably the most obvious and clear example of an actual genuine catharsis that I've had in recent memory. There are a couple other ones. I think I had a catharsis with Persona 5 as well.
Oh, but, really?
Yeah. Just that game it came at the right time, made me just feel the right feelings I needed to feel about the world when things were going. I mean, I was playing that game kind of in the middle of a lot of the stuff over the summer with with the injustices of our world, Black Lives Matter, and all that stuff. And so just the genuine the feeling of being able to be like, yeah, this game truly is this idea, this concept is actually cathartic for me. It's actually allowing me to process and deal with my emotions towards these other things that otherwise I would probably have bottled up. The amount of times I would read an article online and then go Persona and pretend to rip off my glasses or whatever, my mask, was embarrassing to admit, but I did it a lot. But no, Death Stranding was probably the more clear cut, textbook catharsis, because literally I was bawling. It was just, again, the game itself was fantastic leading up to it, but even just that, again, being a brand new father and dealing with the challenges of fatherhood and raising a literal infant at the time, and just that ending sequence with Sam and BB, that I will not go into spoiler details about, but just the relationship between those two characters and how it built, crescendoed, and ended up. It just was like, I'm crying. I am now crying right now. And
I'm not crying, you're crying.
And I feel better after I'm done.
Yep.
Cool. Awesome. Well, then that is DLC. So we want to hear from you. What are games that made you feel cathartic and made you feel better after maybe a terrible period of time in your life, or a terrible week even, or just even a bad day? You had a bad day and then you had a catharsis after playing a game. We want to hear all those thoughts and more, and Termite will tell you where you can share those with us.
You can find us at 80bitpodsmash.com. That's our landing website with links to all of our podcast platforms, as well as our social media outlets. We also have a Discord server that's in the link of all of our show notes, and you can find us on twitch.tv/80bitpodsmash, where we go live every Monday and Wednesday evenings, Monday night for a news show and Wednesday for a video game live stream. There are countless ways with which you can interact with us, dropping into our live chats on Twitch, hitting us up in our Discord server for conversations with our community, or even making a post on our Reddit, or responding to a post on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. There are many, many ways that you can interact with us. Ask us questions, give us your thoughts, ideas, questions, and concerns would be fantastic. We would love to hear from you. And lastly, you can leave us a review on any of those podcast platforms of your choice to help us get bubbled up into the algorithm so that we can be discovered by new folks and add more people into our community, making us a more diverse and more innovative thought conglomerate than we've ever been. So hit us up.
Rock on. All right. So that leads us to our main topic, which is we are doing a developer profile on People Can Fly. They are the studio that is releasing Outriders, which is coming out this week. It should already be out, I think, by the time this episode airs. So I think it comes out the week that we're recording it, actually.
Yep.
And so it'll have been a few days old by it. So if you want to learn more about the game, you'll be able to kind of get more. Obviously, it's not out yet, so we won't be able to talk too much about it. But we did play a demo, so we'll be able to talk about the demo it and get our kind of first impressions out there. But if you want to know more about the game by the time you're listening to this, go check out. Hopefully, there's tons of reviews now at this point on the game, and you should, there's a review embargo should have lifted, so all that should be available to you. But yeah, let's jump into it. So People Can Fly. We usually start this conversation off with just the basics, who they are, what games are they known for, and what is their history/story.
They are a Polish video game developer based in Warsaw. It was founded in February of 2002 by Adrian. And it's Polish. I'm sorry with Polish names. It's Adrian Chmielarz.
Chmielarz, yeah.
Or
Chmielarz, yeah.
Chmielarz, maybe.
We're butchering it, but so let's go.
Chmielarz, previously the co-founder of Metropolis Software, which I just mentioned earlier, made a game called Catharsis, which is hilarious, together with acquaintances Michael Kozierowski and Andrzej Poznański. The studio's first game was called Painkiller in 2004, with the success of which led to a deal with THQ for the game Come Midnight, which allowed the studio to expand. And then they went on to create some other games that you guys might be aware of in a partnership with Epic Games called Bulletstorm in 2011. And they even made one of the sequels of Gears of War, an entry in that franchise called Gears of War Judgment. People Can Fly made them as well. So Epic then bought the studio in 2012. Mm-hmm. We'll probably go into a little bit more of the details of what's happening here, but this is the overall right now.
Sure.
So they bought the studio in 2012, and the three people I just mentioned, Kamilars, Kozargrodsky, and Poznansky, subsequently left, and then they later founded a studio called Astronauts. The People Can Fly name was then rebranded as Epic Games Poland. The studio spun off under its former name and logo in 2015 under the lead chief executive officer Sebastian Wojciechowski. And then in June 2019, People Can Fly employs 200 people in 6 studios. Its most recent game is Outriders, slated to be released in 3 days.
Yeah, so for those who weren't necessarily tracking,
gist.
Their history was they started their own thing. They almost went broke when they were trying to produce a game called Come Midnight with THQ.
Mm-hmm.
THQ basically canceled the project and withheld all remaining payment of $300,000 US dollars. So they basically contacted Epic Games and begged them to give them an evaluation copy of Unreal Engine so that they could make a demo. And Epic Games was intrigued by this and decided to not only handle the agreement, but then they were impressed with the demo and the speed at which they turned it around. I don't even know what the demo was, but they put together a demo of something. And so then they were like, okay, well, we'll allow you to port Gears of War to PCs, and hired them for that project, which saved the studio.
Yeah.
They then were acquired by Epic later. And then almost, a few years later, then all of their head developers, the guys who founded the studio, they all left.
Yep.
And then later they were rebranded as Epic Games Poland. And then their current management decided to leave and spin off as People Can Fly once again. And it seems like all of this was all very amicable. So it sounds like drama, oh my gosh, people are leaving. Epic saved them and then they stabbed them in the back. No, that's not what's happening. It's just they had we'll go into how they had creative differences and stuff like that. But it's an interesting story of how they kind of saved by Epic, bought by Epic, and then decided to part ways with Epic, all within the span of 7 or 8 years or something like that. And so now again, they're operating as an independent studio, publishing Outriders under Square Enix as opposed to with Epic. So interesting stuff.
And the Astronauts, the company that the original 3 founding members founded, made a game called The Vanishing of Ethan Carter back in 2014. It was a horror adventure game, and they're slated to come out with a game called Witchfire, which is an upcoming first-person shooter game, which we all saw in some announcement for PC that kind of went away. We don't really know what's going on with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was announced in 2017, 2019. I don't remember when, but so this version of People Can Fly that we know today has a different founder, different CEO than the original People Can Fly company was back then, but a lot of the staff is the same.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. So let's dig in. Let's talk a little bit. We kind of talked about all these games, but the games that they're known for is they are known for co-working on Gears of War with Epic Games, Gears of War Judgment, which is a spin-off. And then they also ported Gears of War, so they're known for porting Gears of War to PCs.
Mm-hmm. The original one back
for Microsoft. Yep, exactly. Yep. And then they're also known for Painkiller, their first game, Bulletstorm, which they co-developed with Epic. And they also were co-developers of Fortnite, the base, the original Fortnite game, which was a co-op tower defense kind of third-person shooter. It's the same engine as Fortnite. It still plays the same as Fortnite's Battle Royale, but it was the game that was coming out before they decided to pivot into Battle Royale. And it's still a playable part of Fortnite, but it was more of a co-op experience.
Save the World.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So Fortnite Save the World, they worked on that. So that's another big name on this list. And then of course they are known for Outriders, which is already making a bit of a splash, especially in the looter shooter communities. That's just coming out this week. So that's what they're known for. So cool. So usually at this point we will talk about we'll kind of make it personal and talk about our experiences with People Can Fly and what our favorite People Can Fly games are, if we have any.
I've played Gears of War Judgment, and it felt just like Gears of War. And given that it was co-developed with Epic Games, that makes sense. Who knows what they did? There's no way to play the game and know what here is People Can Fly versus what was Epic Games. It all just feels like one cohesive piece of software. So that meant nothing to me. Bulletstorm, I always had my eye on because it seems extremely stylized. First person shooter with big numbers popping up as you kill and do different things. You could zip line down and kick someone and use a shotgun and blow something up. And the more you combo your actions together, you would get a multiplier. And it seemed very Scott Pilgrim-ish in its style. And it was always intriguing. And I have a copy, a lot of us should have a copy from the PlayStation Plus games. The full clip edition was the PS4 port, remastered version of the original one. So I haven't played it though, but I've always been interested in going back to it. And most recently, you may have heard of Bulletstorm as they added Duke Nukem to it for the Nintendo Switch in a partnership with Gearbox. So that's pretty funny, but I really don't have a firm experience with anything from People Can Fly except for the hour and a half, 2 hours I played Outriders, which is probably their most unique and most entirely People Can Fly game that I've played. So that's my only experience.
I'm with you. I'm the same. I think the only game that I've literally played from them is Outriders, and that's actually kind of common for me with a lot of these developers we cover. I know, especially the first few of them, I'd only played the most recent game of theirs. I think when we did Naughty Dog, I hadn't played Uncharted yet, so literally my only experience with Naughty Dog up to that point was The Last of Us, the first one. So what's fun about doing these though for me is that oftentimes I'm inspired to go back and play some more of these games. So I might look into Bulletstorm as well. I don't know. I just looked it up on my library, and I don't think I have it. So I think it was before my PS Plus time.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, so again, if I had to pick a favorite, if you put a gun to my head and say, I'd say Outriders, I guess, because that's the only one I've played. But I'm similarly in the same boat where it's just I haven't played enough of their stuff to really make a judgment. So, but that doesn't say I'm not interested in their stuff. It just is not something I've been they became on my radar because of Outriders. So. All right, cool. Well, what industry innovation do you think that People Can Fly have brought to the table, again, if any, based on your experience with them or what we've read about them?
I have some hope here, and I'm looking at their history and in the Wikipedia page that's talking about what happened with their Epic Games split. Mm-hmm. And Lars, the person whose name I couldn't pronounce, quoted talking about Epic Games says this: "It's not about being right or wrong. Hopefully my vision of the future and their vision of the future are both valid because it's actually possible. They're not in opposition to each other." And he's talking about this in the vein of the Epic Games was approached partially influenced by Tencent's prior investment in the company to help them develop a games as a service. And Lars did not want to do that. He felt that would be limiting for them to develop narrative. It would be limiting for them, and he wanted to develop narrative-driven games. And so that's what he was saying. It's not about being right or wrong. The vision of the future has both. And that was, when did that happen? 2012? Fast forward 9 years to 2021 now. Look how many games as a service there are, and look how many narrative-driven games there are. That future is here, that both are actually possible.
Right, and look at Outriders as kind of the culmination of that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Having played an hour and a half of Outriders, it looks like they're doing both. It's like he's actually putting the literal game to those words about having the vision of the future is both.
Well, yeah, but it's possible. And what's interesting about Outriders, this is I think where Outriders will live or die, as a great, because the gameplay that we've played so far, I'll go ahead and just rip that Band-Aid off and talk about how what I've played so far of Outriders is if it was going to be billed to me as just another Destiny with a roadmap and games as a service, even with monetization and all that stuff, I would probably pass on it entirely if that's what it was being billed as. But what intrigues me about Outriders, the one thing that may get me to end up buying it is the game's going to become it's not going to be a games as a service. They've already said that they don't want to make that, or it is not that. Which you're not buying into a game that's going to have a roadmap and a bunch of content come out later. They may do DLC for it if it's successful, but they're not intending to. So the entire experience that you get in that game is right out of the box. They have a whole end game system. They have a whole end game system that you can buy, that you'll get right out of the box. You'll get 15 raids or whatever the equivalent are right out of the just by buying the game, downloading it, installing it, whatever. It still is an online game because it does there's some co-op opportunities and stuff like that, but it's a full experience right out of the box, and that is kind of unique in the looter shooter genre right now, because even Borderlands has all their DLCs and their season passes and all that stuff. So just having a game where you could be I'm going to invest $60 in it or whatever and have a full looter experience from start to finish without having to wait for more content and then be done with it, put it on the shelf. We're not, People Can Fly don't want you to stick around. They're not sitting there trying to stick you or milk you for monetization. They're just here's a game. Here's a game, enjoy it, have fun, and when you're done with it, say bye. You know what I mean? That's kind of cool, and that is exactly what you're talking about, the kind of culmination of those two ideas of being this game can exist in the looter shooter genre alongside Destiny, alongside Borderlands, alongside these other games that are doing kind of the opposite of what People Can Fly are wanting to do, and that's okay. That's totally fine. It's a space. There's a space for that. So I would say that's probably the biggest innovation that I've seen in this list. Because otherwise, they're just adapting. They're just porting. They're a company that ports games. You know what I mean?
Or like works with other developers to make something.
And they even made that statement. They're like, we're kind of tired of working on other people's intellectual property. We want to do our own. So they're making that happen. That's a reality. But they very much are reminiscent to me of kind of like a different flavor of like Obsidian, because that's Obsidian's story as well. Is like, let's go. Like we've done a really good job adapting other people's IP. Let's go ahead and do our own thing.
Yeah, in an article in Game Informer, which I have here on my shelf, they talked about how they want to prove that they can make they can also write a mature story, and that's why the tone is much more serious than Bulletstorm. So they're even they're continuing down that path. But we want to create something that's unique to ourselves. We want to prove to ourselves in the world we're going to write this more mature story. We're not going to deviate. We are going to deviate from anything we've ever done in the past, and that's another reason why I said that People Can Fly's most unique title that kind of will test them from now on is this game, Outriders. And it's considered AAA because it's published by Square Enix, and that makes it a AAA game because of the size and amount of money that Square Enix put into its budget. So I can say from my personal experience, it does not feel like a AAA game. It definitely feels like a AA game, but we'll see when it comes out. There's a significant day one patch that is supposedly going to spruce things up. I love the fact that this is not a live service game, and it's not like the Division and Destiny, and it will have, but yet it is focused on co-op.
Right.
And I
feel
even
if I don't buy this game on release, this is a game that I'm super comfortable paying $30 for on sale at the holidays or even in a year from now. You know what I mean? Because I'll know it's like I'm not going to have to sit there and keep up. I'll just be able to hop right in and play the same game that people played, a year ago now. And get the same experience out of it without having to feel like, oh, there's all these new systems and all these patches I have to catch up. You know what I mean? Like all this stuff I have to catch up. Like, no, I'll just hop right in and play it and enjoy it. You know what I mean? That's awesome.
And it's interesting now that, we've done this podcast going on 3.5 years now, and we've been so in tune with the gaming industry. And we've always had the idea of like vote with your wallet. And that always made sense for games you want to boycott. But very rarely is that ever the case for a game you want to invest in, even though the game might not be worth the money, but you want to support the developer. And Biomutant is really, really hitting that drum right now with how they've approached not crunch and being honest and transparent with their development and not rushing a game out. And I feel like Outriders is kind of doing the same thing here, or People Can Fly, with being upfront and transparent about this is not a live service game. This is what we want. This is what it is. And I don't know enough about the company, but they just announced that they're 300 employees now. So how do they approach crunch? How are their employees treated? What kind of company is this morally and ethically? That it might not be worth $60, but that's how much the game costs, and it could be worth looking into to purchase this game, even if the reviews aren't that great. And but if you're going to have a good time, I think the release window here in April of 2021 is amazing and perfect for them because there's nothing else.
It's coming out April 1st, or it came out April 1st, April Fool's Day.
And there's nothing else to play. Like everyone's got these new consoles. It's coming to Game Pass on day one, which will install a huge market base into People Can Fly's radar. Like just boom, right off the bat, day one. It's very smart. Microsoft sealing that deal. People Can Fly got a huge injection of cash, I'm sure, for that. And on PlayStation Now, with not the Surface PlayStation Now, I'm sorry, with the PlayStation 5, you can get it for $60 at launch. And who knows how successful they'll be with it, but there's nothing else to compete with. This is it. Like, this is the co-op game to play right now.
Yeah,
there's nothing else out there.
The closest thing to it coming out is around the same time as Returnal. And like you said, it's not a co-op experience. It may have looter shooter elements, but it's not a co-op experience. So yeah, you're right. This is the looter shooter co-op game, short of playing Borderlands again.
Yep.
This is the looter shooter game of the next generation consoles. Though to be fair, it's also on Xbox One and PS4. It's a cross-gen thing as well. So
the closest game that competes in this genre, I think, is Deathloop, coming May 21st.
Yeah.
So you're a month and a half out from, or almost 2 months away from any competing entry. You get to envelop the conversation about looter shooters.
Is Deathloop co-op or is it competitive? Is it even multiplayer? I don't even know.
Yeah, it's definitely multiplayer.
Okay,
I think
so
it's
one
4
of
versus 4, or maybe
okay,
it's
gotcha.
2 versus 2, but it has the whole dang it, Dishonored. The Dishonored approach from the same company that made Dishonored, Arcane Studios, and it's all about like the Hitman style of way of millions of different ways to assassinate the other player, but the other person is a player. So it is multiplayer in that regard. Gotcha. But anyway, that's even and that's not even a direct competition with what Outriders is. So it's still, and that's why I say like the next game to come out that's even close, that's even in the same ballpark maybe, is Deathloop, and that's 2 months away. So they have a 2-month wide open, nothing else will be talked about as far as new games except for Outriders. So it is,
and it's making splashes. We didn't have the best like we didn't necessarily, you and I didn't necessarily have like love it, but there's a group out there that loves the game. Like I've been reading articles about people who are talking about how like, as you know, big fans of the looter genre are like, you can get legendaries in the demo. You could go play the demo for free right now on your PlayStation 5 or PlayStation 4 or Xbox One or Xbox Series X or Game Pass, whatever. Steam, you can go play the demo right now, and you could grind for legendaries. You could even do a little loot chase even in the demo, even in that little like 5-hour demo. That exists right now, which is pretty cool, which indicates that there's a loot chase from even the beginning of the game. Before you're you don't have to get to end game to get the loot chase. You can start getting that loot from the get-go. And people seem to be pretty impressed with what the loot has to offer. So yeah, there's a lot that's drawing people to this game, and it's definitely making waves. People are definitely interested in Outriders, so it's going to make some noise.
And supposedly there's a 30 to 40 hour campaign.
Yeah.
Which, as I was playing it, I was like, this game's going to have like a 10-hour campaign. But I'm not yeah. right. So apparently it's a huge, meaty campaign. Yeah.
And like an end game grind with content that is specific to end game. So yeah, pretty cool. So this could be a several 100-hour game for some people, and that's great. So cool. All right. Well, let's skip this next question because I just don't think it's applicable. Other than, it's not even worth talking about. So let's just move on to the last question and finish off here. What do you think you'd like to see more or less of from People Can Fly in the future?
I want to see more of them.
Yeah.
Like their story is enthralling. It's interesting. It has that creative flair to it so there's two different kind of camps of companies that you can see. One is clearly in it for the money and the opportunity to make money. And then one is, I have this vision and this amazing art like style and desire to make something that connects with people. And I want to use that to then make money. So there's two different camps there. And I feel like People Can Fly exists on the creative aspect of that spectrum. And I want to see what they're capable of. And I think this is a great entry. Outriders, it makes me intrigued to experience what this mature story is, and so I want to see more of them. What's after Outriders? What else do they have? Like what is this team that's now 300 employees? What can they make? Let's go. I'm in.
Yeah, Outriders is interesting because the game really starts off on like a strong visual foot where you're like, wow, this is beautiful. And then somewhere along the way, they just like blow it up and are like, oh, now it's a bunch of brown and greens and grays and, like it just, the color palette suddenly gets really dark. And part of me, like, while playing the demo, I was like, I kind of wanted to explore this world before it went to crap. You know what I mean? Like, I would love to see what they're capable. And again, maybe it's not with Outriders, or maybe in Outriders, we only saw the first 5 hours of the game, of a 30 to 40 hour campaign. So maybe it does like, brighten up later in the game. Maybe there are some more unique biomes and stuff like that. But that's what, again, they made such a good first impression with that, like, beautiful world that I'm like, I want to see them make a beautiful world to explore. I almost want to see Outriders with more of an open concept idea that maybe is not so as intense. In this case, I'm glad they're making more mature games. That's fine. I'm fine with that. But like, mature doesn't also necessarily have to mean bleak. Yeah. And so, like, I would love to see what Outriders. I do want to see where Outriders goes. With its the full game. But beyond that, I would love to see them take the idea of what they started with Outriders and then, expand upon it. It doesn't have to be a looter shooter, but just I want to see them make a really big, beautiful world because I think they have the potential and the creativity for it. So, and I can see that even just with Outriders and their other games. So, cool. Awesome. Well, is that a good stopping place? Do you have any other final thoughts on People Can Fly?
I think the game is a little out of its time now. You talked about like the bleak era and of video games. To me, that is from like 2007 to 2015. There's like this bleak era where everything was gray and dark. And we talked about it in our decades of gaming. And so I think this game it was from that era, but now polished to exist on modern platforms. And so, but it exists after the games as a services have kind of ran through the industry. And so it is a weird game out of time. It has elements of the future and it has elements from the past that we don't like. And the things from the future that we do like are the post looter shooter or the post games as a service, live service type games that drive us all nuts. So it's a very weird juxtaposition to be in for this game. And I think it's definitely got my attention for sure.
For sure, yeah, exactly. So, all right, cool. Well, hopefully, like I said, I mean, this game has been on my radar for a while. I've been very intrigued by it. I like the idea of the class. They have 4 classes, and I like the idea that they each manipulate like a different kind of aspect of physics. The tricksters manipulate time. The devastators manipulate gravity, and therefore Earth. Like they're kind of earthbenders because they can manipulate gravity.
Mm-hmm.
The pyromancers manipulate temperature, and the technomancers manipulate electricity, which allow them to control gadgets and stuff like that.
I didn't realize Devastator was an earthbender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Now it makes sense.
So, like, I like that concept, and the game's that was what originally drew me to the game, and then also that it was a looter shooter. So I'm interested to see where they go with it. And I do want this game to succeed. It didn't necessarily make the best first impression for me on the demo, but I'm also willing to, they're also releasing a lot of fixes day one that are addressing some of the annoyances I had with the game. Like the cutscenes have a really shaky camera for some stupid reason. And they're addressing that. They're addressing that the fact that the cutscenes run at 30 frames per second in the demo, they'll be running at 60 frames per second in just like the gameplay in the PS5 version, in the PS5 version when the full game comes out. So they're addressing a lot of those annoyances. There's still things like weird game design where like when you go through a door, instead of a loading screen, they have a little cutscene of your character opening the door. That's it. It's a cutscene of the character going and open. It's a stupid way to handle it. I was like, just give me the loading screen. You know what I mean? I'd prefer the loading screen at this point. So there's some still weird gameplay choices, but overall it's still in a very intriguing game. And so I want it to succeed. I want to be like, cool, I'm going to grab this game on sale, for $50 or whatever. You know what I mean? 50, 45, 30, I would pay that for it. I just don't feel like I would be willing to pay $60 based on the demo alone right now. But I still want it to succeed. So I want to play the game. I want to have time to play the game.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully
I think I'm going to preload it on my Xbox Series X. And I'll be able to play it on day one with the full-blown patch and create a character and experience what the release game looks like, even though all of my friends are on PlayStation, and then determine from there whether I'll use Game Pass as a full-blown demo as opposed to
decide if you want it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
and I'll see what I think of it. And it'll be a way for me to create a different character too and experience it there. So yeah, we'll see. That'll be good.
All right, awesome. Well, we ended up talking about Outriders a lot because it is their most recent work. Okay, so that kind of happens with these developer profiles. But we also
but
don't
even
have a
more
ton of
so
experience.
with this company, they didn't really have anything else to talk about except Bulletstorm, which was a linear kind of based story shooter, very shallow. There wasn't a whole lot to their history to talk about. So
for sure,
it makes sense that we would just hype up this new thing because it looks pretty cool.
And it's an interesting thing in and of itself, especially when you take into account their history. So
we did promise our audience a discussion about Fox News.
Oh, true. Yeah. What? Gosh, I guess we'll go back to that real quick. We'll spend 3 minutes talking about it. But apparently, this is directly related to their game Bulletstorm that they co-developed with Epic. Gosh, sorry, blank on the name. But they it ended up being featured as a controversy with Fox News because Fox News ran some article, had their psychologist Carol Lieberman or whatever run an article like a hit article on all these games, how all these games. She has thousands of examples of games that contribute to rape culture, basically, sexual assault culture, because they have sexual images in them or something like that. And it was a thing, it became a thing, that Fox News did. It's huge controversy. And her book the Carol Lieberman, her book got review bombed. Yeah, back in 2011. It's crazy. I was like,
by
they were doing
enraged
review
gamers,
bombs. Yep, exactly. But it was this huge kind of controversy between Fox News and the gaming community. A lot of game journalists kind of ran, defense counterpoint articles against Fox News about it. And it was I didn't even know this was going on. So,
I didn't either. Yeah.
Yeah. This whole thing happened back in the beginning of the decade and was, a lot of this, a lot of the game journalism sites that we follow now in order to kind of source a lot of our talking points, Kotaku, Rock, Paper, Shotgun, Polygon, they all kind of ran, they were all back then around for one and defending Bulletstorm and People Can Fly and Epic Games because Fox News decided to randomly attack them and use them as an example as to why video games were ruining the fabric of society.
Yeah, this psychologist Carol Lieberman that you talked about that Fox News used as a panel went from 1,000 sources down to 8 that she actually referenced. And of those 8, one of them had anything to do with the subject at hand, according to Rock, Paper, Scissors, or Rock, Paper, Shotgun, after analyzing Lieberman's claims. So, you go from 1,000 to 8 to 1 that had sort of maybe something to do with the subject at hand. Kotaku quoted actual data from the U.S. Department of Justice that rape cases have been declining since 1973, refuting all of the statistics And of course, the response comes back from Lieberman saying, "Oh, well, all of your stats are known to be variable and unreliable," which is very Fox News,
right? Of course. All of your facts are questionable, but our facts, the ones we made up, those are the real facts. I also love the idea that, like, oh, suddenly Fox News cares about, like, sexual assault issues. Like, they don't care unless they're trying to take down another industry. You know what I mean? Like, unless they're trying to take down an industry that the liberals love. I guess video games is, despite the fact that there are statistics to show that, like, there's lots of conservative players out there. Why would you? I don't know. If you're going for, like, if Fox News wants to be relevant to young audiences, why go after something that a lot of their young audience members might actually love, which is video games? It's weird. It was a really weird story. And again, it doesn't really have to do anything with People Can Fly. It was just one of their games was singled out as the cited example, like a cited example, one of 8 cited examples of how, you know, it's causing young men to want to assault people.
Right?
It's like facepalm. And I like to say that, like, what I said was one of the people from Fox News was like, the video game's contribution to the violent society is reaching a fever pitch. And I was like, oh yes, because we all remember the great video game riots of 2012 that would only come mere months later than from this article and the fever pitch. Yes, oh gosh, society barely recovered from the violent gamers who just started pouring out of the streets one day. That's the thing that happened.
Right.
So it's fun to look at that in hindsight and be like, yeah, guess what? Like, all things considered, the amount of violence in our country has, like, gone down since video games have been around, you know, from a grand scheme of things. So, yeah.
Except for gun violence, but that's a different topic.
Yeah, right.
So, there's that.
But as we've talked about before, in most cases,
not related to video games,
right? And like the mass, like in like it was something like 9 out of the 11 mass shootings that happened over the course of like a year that they were doing the study, like only like 2 of them had even ever played video games before. Like, gamers aren't the ones going out and shooting people. People who don't have an outlet for that are the ones going out and shooting people. People who do have an outlet for their tendencies, you know, i.e. video games, seem to be just completely. Hey, it's back to this idea of catharsis. They have a catharsis, and it's fine.
Look at that. You brought it back full circle. You're full amazing.
I guess so. I guess when you have a crappy week, you're just firing on all cylinders from there on out.
I like it. You sure you're not medicated yet?
No, I'm really not.
You can face push me for
what you need to say is, are you sure you need medication?
That's what I should have said. You're right. That's exactly what I should have said.
Just wait. When I get medication, it's gonna just, like, our shows are just gonna be, we're gonna blow up because I'm gonna be like that much better. Because then I'll be able to no longer be holding you back. Together, we will ascend.
Yep.
And next year we'll be hosting E3, and it's all because I took Adderall.
Hosting E3. It's no longer the ESA, it's Penguin and Termite.
Yeah, it's the Penguin and Termite show. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. I'm here for it. Let's go.
All right, cool. Oh, well, on that note, that's our show. So we want to hear what your thoughts are on People Can Fly, whether it's the Fox News controversy, whether it's their relationship with Epic Games, whether it's the games they've made and what's your favorite. If maybe you've been following People Can Fly for a long time, we want to hear from people who have been and have experienced all their games and love them. So, but maybe you hate all these games, and maybe you think Outriders is going to be complete garbage and trash. We want to hear that thought too. All of those thoughts and feelings are valid here in 80-Bit Pod Smash Space. So Termite will remind you once again where you can share those ideas if you have them.
I'll give you the quick spiel, and that is 80bitpodsmash.com, where you'll find links to all of our social media outlets and our podcast platforms. There's a Discord server link in all of our show notes at that website. You can interact with us on any of those spaces, so please let us know what you think of Outriders, either before or after you play it.
Rock on, awesome. So as Termite hinted at earlier, we have actually already recorded next week's episode. You can look forward next week to us having a conversation about new IPs versus existing franchises. We're going to discuss whether or not developers should spend their time focusing on developing new ideas, or whether they should rely on their tried and true franchises that have worked for them in the past. We have that whole conversation. It's awesome. It's great. And you can look forward to listening to that next week.
Which kind of plays into this conversation tonight. Outriders being a new IP.
Yeah,
why is
absolutely.
it not Bulletstorm 2?
Yep, for sure.
Find out next week.
All right. We'll talk to you then.
See you next week.